what are some of the things that you really want to focus on?
Yeah, I think just building out the right teams, right? Like most head coaches in the NFL, they're not calling the offensive and defensive plays, right? There's guidelines in place that the head coach gives to those coordinators, and he can make some, high-level decisions during a game or during the week or whatever, but it goes back to who you're hiring, in March or February or whenever it is. And, I've just seen the benefits of having really good people and the fallbacks of maybe not making the right decision.
Beyond the Blueprint podcast. Welcome back. I'm your host, Branson Bowen, and today we're sitting down with Jeff Driskel. Jeff, thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here and looking forward to diving in.
Yeah, no, so I'll let you introduce yourself. I know you got a lot of things going on, not only in your professional career, but also just career and business. So I'll let you kind of dive in and then we can kind of go into your story.
Yeah, so live here in Orlando in the off seasons. Live with my wife Taryn and our 3 kids. Before we got on air, we started talking about challenges that come with a 5, 3, and 1 year old, and how awesome it is, but the challenges behind it. So we got our hands full with that. Just finished up my 8th year in the NFL. Having a blast playing football. I've been on 6 teams in 8 years, so I've bounced around. Got, really, really cool exposure to a bunch of, teammates, coaches, support staff over the years. And it's been a great experience. And, I hope to be able to do it for years to come. But, like I mentioned, being on 6 teams in 8 years, you get cut, so many times, and you start to think about, what's going to be next whenever that time comes. And, that's kind of what brought us here today is, balancing, playing NFL football and competing at the highest level, but also setting yourself up for a smooth transition after ball. So, we'll dive into that in a little bit, but a lot of balls in the air, having a blast, using both sides of my brain,
there you go.
enjoying the off season as much as possible while also trying to, advance my future career.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about your football career. So how'd that start? Let's go back all the way from Pee Wee or high school, and then what's that look like?
So growing up, I was a baseball player.
Yeah.
I go back and look at the home videos that are, on VHS now, and I see myself in the backyard playing baseball only, and I played strictly baseball until I think it was 7th grade. The cool kids at school would wear their Pop Warner jerseys to school on Friday.
Yeah.
And I was like, why don't we do that in baseball? I want to be cool. I want
the
everyone
audience
to notice
is like
me.
way smaller.
Yeah,
That's why.
exactly. So that was kind of what got me into playing football was like I want to be in the in crowd, So I wanted to wear my jersey on Friday. Started playing in 7th grade. There was a weight limit. I was too heavy in 7th grade for the 8th grade team. So I had to cut weight to make the 8th grade team when I was in 7th grade. And I started out as number 44 playing defensive line and fullback. And a few games in, a couple quarterbacks got hurt, and I had a good enough arm to stand back there and figure it out. So that's what launched me into playing quarterback.
So football. And so then you go to high school. You went to Hagerty?
Went to Hagerty High School, yep. It was a brand new school at the time, in a tough division or conference or, however it's labeled in high school. And my freshman year there was only freshman, sophomore, and junior. So we got just worked that year. We lost every game, and I was the starting quarterback on varsity, and really a eye-opening experience for, man, these guys are talented. They're big, strong, and fast, and really, really good exposure at a young age, but eye-opening.
Yeah. And then you go to Florida, right? And so what's that transition like?
Yeah, so, going back to high school, took some bumps and bruises early on. Was basically the same size that I am now. When I graduated high school, I was 6'4", 225, ran a 4.5 40.
Not many people can say
no,
that. Right?
No. It's definitely God-given ability, which has, gotten me into the position, where I'm at today. But I say all that to say I was the number 1 recruited, quarterback coming out of high school. 5-star. I wish there was NIL money back then.
Yeah.
That would have been a cool deal. But I ended up choosing Florida over, a bunch of other marquee programs, and really, really loved my time there, and, spent 4 years there, and ended up transferring to Louisiana Tech my 5th year.
What was your reasoning for choosing Florida?
I mean, they were fresh off winning national championships. It's an hour and a half down the road. The depth chart at the time, I could see myself getting thrown in there pretty early. Some guys, you go to these big programs and you just get buried on the depth chart. The way that the roster was built out, I had a legitimate chance to, be the backup my freshman year and then take the reins over, as a sophomore. And in my head, I'm going to win the Heisman as a sophomore and a junior and then get drafted first overall. So, it made sense to go to Florida, and great school.
Yeah.
Got to sneak that in there. Great school as well. But yeah, it was a no-brainer at the time.
Yeah. And so you go to Louisiana Tech for year 5. And then, we were talking about having Jeff Fain on here and being first-round draft pick after he finished the school. And so that process getting to the NFL, it was a lot different than Jeff's.
Yeah.
So what was that like for you?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I was the backup my freshman year. My sophomore year, I was the starting quarterback. We were ranked number 3 in the country at the end of the season. I'm dating myself here, but there was no college football playoff back then. Mm-hmm. So, we ended up playing in the Sugar Bowl, and we lost, but we had a really nice year with some momentum going into year 3. And, it was going to be the time for me to make a big jump after getting a full season of starting experience under my belt. And, it didn't go well. Third game in, I broke my ankle, out for the year, which was a major bummer. I was borderline depressed. Am I done? Am I ever going to come back to how I was? So it was a tough year. I ended up growing as a Christian, growing as a person, but it was tough. It was really tough.
Yeah, and then you get drafted.
I ended up getting drafted. Yep. So I'll answer your actual question here. So the next year I come back as the starter in my 4th year. And I don't play that good. I play okay, but, not great. End up getting benched. At the end of the season, I decided to transfer to Louisiana Tech, which is a great program. We had some really good players. A ton of guys from my team ended up in the NFL. And, I was fortunate enough to get drafted in the 6th round. Not like Jeff in the 1st round where, you're getting all this guaranteed money and, they're expecting you to come in and start. I was coming in like competing to make the roster.
Sure.
Right. But doesn't matter when your name gets called in that draft. It's a life-changing experience.
Yeah.
And it was an awesome day with my friends and family.
Yeah. I'm sure, you experienced a lot of obstacles, getting to that. Right. And like you mentioned, just getting drafted alone is a huge, statement and testament to like what you've worked so hard to get. How did you like overcome a lot of that? And what was that feeling? Was there like a huge weight lifted off, or was like, okay, that's done. I'm here. Now I got to prove myself even more.
Yeah. I mean, going back to when I got injured, right? Like, there's a lot of temptations at the University of Florida, whether it's, girls, bars, whatever it is. And I fell into some of those temptations, as a young kid. And there was this guy, his name was Don Malden. He was the, I don't want to say, it's not pastor, but he was the chaplain of the football team, and he kept pursuing me. And, I wouldn't give him the time of day. Don, go away. I don't want to talk. And there was one day I was on a 1-leg scooter when I had my broken leg, and I had to go all the way across campus, and it was hot in the middle of the summer. I was gassed. So I stopped into the recruiting room, called the Gator Room, to get some air conditioning and to take a load off. And Don walks over, sits down at the table next to me, and he kind of had me trapped. And he told me all about Jesus. And I said, all right, man, like, you've been coming after me for a year and a half to tell me about this guy Jesus. There must be something to him.
Right.
Let's hear it. And right That's then awesome. And there, I gave my life to Jesus. And I think that was really the foundation of how I overcame any and all obstacles in my life was that day.
Sure. It's interesting. Are you still close with him?
I'm not as close as I would like to be.
Sure.
Life gets in the way. I'm here half the year, gone half the year. Got, 3 kids as I referenced, but every once in a while I'll check in with them.
Yeah.
And, he doesn't know how big of an impact that he had on my life.
Right.
and I need to tell them more often.
Today's episode is brought to you by Bryce Knuth of Insurance Office of America. As a contractor or real estate owner in Florida, you've likely experienced the impact of rising insurance premiums year after year. With the challenging insurance marketplace, having a specialist who focuses on your industry is critical now more than ever before. If you'd like a second set of eyes on your current insurance program or don't have a relationship with your current broker, please contact Bryce Knuth at 407-697-6944 via call or text, or email bryce.knuth@ioausa.com. Don't let rising insurance costs catch you off guard. Reach out to Bryce today. Yeah. Well, it's interesting whether it's, sports or even in business, the impact that someone like that, especially, in the spiritual realm, right? When you're giving your life to Christ, but even having someone in your life that's pursuing you, that's, asking, are you okay? How can I be of service? How can I help? That then becomes almost like a mentor, yep. Right? It's a catalyst that kind of catapults you a little bit further in your life. And then, still to this day, you remember that exact scenario that, yep. You were in. Yep. And I'm sure, and you can speak to this, but that scenario probably plays a lot in your head as you deal with other things.
Absolutely. I mean, when I first got into the league, I was shaking in my boots. I'm the 6th round pick, maybe I make the team, maybe I don't. I'm in the locker room with all these, Pro Bowlers, 1st round picks, guys with all this money. And I'm just nervous, right? Like, I don't know what to expect. And, I kind of just found somebody with a friendly face that was, willing to pour into me. And, there's been a number of guys in my career that have kind of walked me through, how do you stick around, how do you add value even if you're not the starter. And, that's helped a ton in my football career, as well as, as I, try to play the business game as well. There's so many people out there, if you're willing to open your mouth and be vulnerable a little bit, that are willing to pour back into you.
Sure.
And I've been so surprised with the amount of people that are willing to, give you some advice and help right. along the way.
So I want to touch on that a little bit of, you'd mentioned the advice of how do you stick around, right? If you're not the starter, yep. Right? And I think there's a parallel there, especially in business. How do you provide value? How do you stay consistent? How do you continue to work hard in business, even if you're not the one crushing it, right? If you're not at the top level, how do you keep doing that? So what was some of the advice that you got from some of these guys?
Yeah. So, in football, it's a laid path. Like, you play well in high school, you go to college. You play good enough in college, you go to the NFL. If you can prove that you're, worth keeping on the roster, you'll stick around in the NFL for a couple of years. So it's a very laid out path. One thing that I've really come to learn over the past handful of years is, business, especially small business where I'm playing, there's a lot of ambiguity. There's no one right way to do it.
Sure.
There's wrong ways to do it. But really it's what works best for you and your family at that time. You figure it out along the way, and you do it with good people around you. And, you'll come out better on the other side.
Sure. How has your relationship with Jesus changed over time?
It's gotten better. Yeah.
Ideally, that's a scenario.
Yeah, definitely better than where I started. Like in anything though, right? Like, you look at somebody who's crushing it in business, and, the first question I want to ask is, well, how do I do it? Yeah. And I want an answer that's a very linear path. And that's not the case in 99.99% of the conversations that you have. There's twists and turns, and there's pivots, and
luck.
There's luck. There's right place at the right time, and creating your own luck. You're really good at that, by the way, getting in front of the right people. But yeah, it's twists and turns along the way, and it's not linear, and that can be frustrating.
Sure.
And that's how it's been in my walk with Jesus as well. There's been points where I've been, the highest of highs, lowest of lows, straight away, and he, ropes me back in, and so it's trending up, but not, on the straight path.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I think that's part of just life, right? And I think as Christians, our walk with life is not always linear. We're humans. We live in a very, broken and fallen world. Yeah. And there's things that happen in life that just happen,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and we have rightful emotions towards them, whether that be anger or fear or anxiety. Um, but at the end of the day, it is about continuing to, I guess, to go back to that relationship point. It's continuing that relationship, continuing to progress. No
Yeah.
matter, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
this straight shot.
Yeah.
But staying consistent in your relationship, and then kind of allowing that to grow as your
Yeah.
life continues
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
progress.
It's marginal growth, right? It's stacking one habit on another
Sure.
and staying true to it. And you look up 10 years down the line and, next thing you know, you're the guy that is pouring into the next generation. So I hope to be in that seat,
Right. Right.
in 10, 15 years when I'm a little grayer and hopefully a little wiser.
We get wiser with experience.
Yeah, that's right.
So your path in the NFL, right? So you're what, 6 years in?
Just finished up 8, man.
Eight years
I'm a
in.
graybeard in the league,
There,
right?
yeah.
Like I come home and I'm this young guy in our neighborhood and trying to figure out the business world. And I go back into the locker room and they're asking, "You got how many kids? You've been around for how long?" So it's a weird dynamic, but yeah, 8 years.
Yeah. So how has that been in the NFL? I mean, you've jumped around a lot.
Yep.
I'm sure that there's challenges along that path.
Oh, yeah.
How's that been?
It's been awesome.
Yeah.
It's been awesome. I got drafted by the 49ers in the 6th round, was cut like three months into my career. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I done before it started? I'm fortunate enough to get picked up by Cincinnati. Was there for, just over 3 years, kind of cut my teeth in the NFL there, kind of figured it out a little bit, was able to play, probably, 8 or 9 games over the course of 3 years and, bounced around since then. I was in Detroit, Denver, Houston, Arizona, Cleveland. So I've been exposed to a bunch of different offenses, a bunch of different people, and it's been great. Obviously, the ideal scenario is to stick in one spot, but the vast majority of the league isn't on, 5-year, $100 million contracts, right? Sure. It's figure out a way to stay alive and add value while you can, and just like in the business world, right? Like your reputation precedes you.
Sure.
I go from one team to another and they already know all about me because they have a buddy on another staff.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, just try to add as much value as I can. And most of the time it's not actually on the field, which is kind of weird.
Are you ready to go beyond the blueprint? Introducing Nexus, the ultimate game changer for commercial real estate and development professionals. Nexus revolutionizes how deals are made and projects come to life. With our cutting-edge SaaS platform, we're revolutionizing the built environment, making your workflow seamless. Vendors gain instant access to opportunities tailored to their needs, while organizations find consultants, vendors, and contractors with a click of a button. Our all-in-one mapping and deal-making interface powers municipalities and site selectors to shape the future of cities nationwide. Join Nexus today and be a part of the future of commercial real estate and construction. Visit our website now to pre-register and get immediate access to what is to come. Visit gonexus.us. The power to transform your project starts here. And so I want to jump into that. I guess the first question is, so you've seen a lot of different, you've been with different teams. Obviously, there's different leadership tactics and strategies.
Sure.
What are some of the things, as far as a team perspective and building a successful strategy and team to accomplish a goal? What is some of the things that you've saw from some of these teams that you're like, okay, these guys are nailing it?
Yeah. Again, no one right way to do it.
Sure.
Like my assumption going into the league was that every building was going to look the exact same, very cookie cutter. All right, we figured out what optimal looks like and everybody got the secret sauce. But that's just not the case, right? Like there's been teams where, we would have an hour team meeting every day. And then there's been teams where we have a 5-minute team meeting every 2 or 3 days. So it's so different, but I think the best staffs communicate very well and communicate efficiently, and everybody knows, where they stand, on the depth chart, what their role is and what expectations are, and however you have to communicate that, go do it.
Yeah. And how have you learned from some of those? And as you get into the business side of things, how have you learned some of those strategies that those teams did successful? And you're like, okay, I want to replicate that into business. And what are some of those things? Obviously, communication's huge.
Yeah.
but you mentioned one thing is like figuring out who's good at what and who's not good at certain things, making that team atmosphere kind of capable. As you transition into business, what are some of the things that you really want to focus on?
Yeah, I think just building out the right teams, right? Like most head coaches in the NFL, they're not calling the offensive and defensive plays, right? There's guidelines in place that the head coach gives to those coordinators, and he can make some, high level decisions during a game or during the week or whatever, but it goes back to who you're hiring, in March or February or whenever it is. And, I've just seen the benefits of having really good people and the fallbacks of maybe not making the right decision. And it's going to end up falling on the leader, right? That's his responsibility to build out the right team. But also the delegation piece, right? In a football organization, it's very defined what the optimal org structure is, right? You have your head coach and your GM that kind of work together, kind of checks and balances a little bit. You have your coordinators, and then you have position coaches under those coordinators, and then their support staff under those guys. Then you have a whole nother side, that deals with nutrition, strength, onboarding players. It's really just to keep, each individual person's core focus just dialed into what they're supposed to do, and not have so many, balls in the air.
Right. And so going back to the second question, that leadership portion of you mentioned, adding value, even though sometimes it's not on the field.
Yeah.
Right. And becoming a leader in the locker room or to your team, even though you're not the starter quarterback. In business, there are instances where, we want to try to add value, but either, if you're young, you don't have the experience, you don't have the connections, you don't have X, Y, and Z, there's still an opportunity to add value.
Yeah.
What are some of those things that you kind of really honed into, I guess, especially in your football career of trying to add value to other people?
Yeah. I mean, the obvious KPIs in football are touchdown passes, to interception ratio, wins and losses as a quarterback. And then in business, it's dollars and cents, right? But some of the things that are really meaningful over the long haul for successful organizations aren't going to show up on the stat sheet, right? And I've always been one to really figure out, what is my role, right? Is my role a backup quarterback? Is it a third string quarterback? How do I take advantage of the meeting room and, get my thoughts out there, in a way that helps us on Sunday? And you have to get to a position in your career where your thoughts are listened to, and you have to you have to have a reputation that says this guy knows what he's talking about. So I wasn't just in there as a rookie, blabbing my mouth when I didn't know what I was talking about. Right. But yeah, just provide as much support to the quarterback as possible, to the quarterback coach, send some text messages to the coordinator. Hey, what do you think about this play versus this defense? So yeah, it's really just, selfishly figuring out a way to stick, but also, how do I help our team win if I'm not out there throwing touchdowns?
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like it's mainly relational.
Yeah, it's people.
Yeah.
Every organization is just a bunch of people, hopefully rowing in the right direction. And, it's people, like you said. Yeah.
I mean, we're all, people is the hardest part of anything.
Wild
right?
cards, man.
It's always a wild
Myself
card.
included.
Yeah. And like you had mentioned, getting everybody rowing in the same direction is often difficult, especially as you venture into, areas that you're not certain in or maybe are outside your wheelhouse. So it's a great segue to what you're doing in business. So explain a little bit about what you guys are focused on, how you're trying to position yourself outside of your football career and kind of how you're transitioning your company and doing that.
Yeah. So I'll kind of walk it back a little bit. I mentioned I've been cut a handful of times over the course of my career. And there's always that, that little voice in the back of your head saying, hey, like you need to figure it out for when you're done. Right. Yeah. There was people that would ask early in my career, what are you going to do after football? And I was kind of tired of saying, I'll figure it out, when that time
8 years
comes.
in, it's
all
right.
I was tired of answering, no plan B, know. So
I'm burning the boats. This is it. Hall of Fame.
I'm going to play till I'm 45 and, hopefully I can walk. But yeah, so the low hanging fruit in the locker room was real estate and venture capitalism. That's kind of what what guys were getting into off the field. You try to position yourself to earn some passive income. And I'm still not sure that that's realistic. I don't think there's any actual passive income.
Yeah.
But, I didn't have a risk appetite for, getting into the VC world, didn't have a big enough wallet to do that. Understood enough on the real estate side, to kind of figure out if that's what I wanted to do. You buy a building for X amount of dollars, you put X amount of dollars into it, and you sell it for more, you rent it. Like, I get that. So I started off doing some single family flips, figured out what taxes were pretty quickly, and said, hey, like, I don't think this is what I want to do. It's not super scalable unless you have a really, really large infrastructure. So I said, you know what, I'm going to hold these things now. So then I got into a handful of single family rentals. Again, unit economics, you have to have a ton of single family rentals if you want that to be your main gig. I'm like, okay, I learned a couple things, and, doing both of these projects, let's move up a level. So got in on the LP side on a handful of multifamily deals with the thought that, hey, I'm going to learn something in every deal that I do. I'm going to make some money along the way, but it's going to position me nicely when I'm done to get on the GP side and be a real estate professional. And the more and more deals I did, I didn't enjoy the operations as much as I thought I would. Still love the asset class, still invest passively, but, kind of took a look in the mirror and said, it's not what I want to do. There's no true professional passion here. And at that point, I was 6-7 years into the league, had a little bit of coin in my pocket and said, you know what, I don't want to be a W-2 employee. I know that, so I have to go be an entrepreneur. What does that look like? Do I start a gym? Do I, do whatever? I have to go 0 to 1. And I came across this, this opportunity to buy small businesses and operate them and grow them and, position yourself to either hold long-term for cash flow or exit at some point, and just fell in love with the idea. So yeah, we're going after, small businesses and, trying to optimize them, in the long term, and just create really good culture within each individual business, and hopefully over time create some synergies and make them better for all stakeholders.
Sure. So last question, we'll wrap up episode 1. What is something, as you transition out of football, I mean, you're still in football, but you're really focusing on the business side of things. You've kind of you dabbled in the real estate stuff, you're getting into the business stuff. What's something that you've learned along the way that's really like stuck?
You don't have to have it all figured out.
Yeah.
I was always one, I have to have everything, every minute detail figured out in order to jump in. And that's just not the case, especially at a young age. Like, I'm 30, almost 31 now. Still have a long time in my professional career, and still definitely figuring it out. But definitely don't be scared to jump in and take a couple calculated risks to figure out what it is exactly you want to do.
Yeah. Execution.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the business side of things, calculated risk is calculated, and the risk is
Yep.
underlined, highlighted, yep. Bolded.
Yep.
But you have to be able to execute.
Yep.
And I think that execution is what most people do struggle with. Because, for me, I was definitely the person, I've got to have all my ducks in a row.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to have it all figured out. And you realize very quickly that the longer you try to figure it out, the more opportunities you miss out on.
Analysis by paralysis.
Correct.
And let's be honest, we're never going to have it all figured out.
No.
Yeah.
So, going back to what are those puzzle pieces, and people, you can figure out X, Y, and Z, but then have somebody else with you to figure out A, B, and C.
Yep.
Right. And so there's a ton of value there of who you partner with, who you decide to do business with, how you connect with people. Has there been anybody that's been impactful to your business side of things that's helped you along that way?
Oh man, there's been so many people that I'm not even going to start to,
rattle them
try to name names. But like I mentioned earlier, just the amount of people that are willing to pour into you and grab coffee and go to lunch and check in periodically it's incredible.
Sure.
But I've also found, like, nobody's going to go out and do it for you.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to just say, do this, and that. And next thing you know, you're sipping Mai Tais on the beach,
Right.
right? Like, and they're not going to pour into you unless they notice you, taking their advice or moving in the right direction or doing it for themselves, right? They're not just going to pour into you if they don't think there's going to be any action taken. So it's mostly on your shoulders. But yeah, creating a network, getting it out there, what you want to do, what direction you want to go in. And, as you know, the network just expands pretty rapidly.
Yeah, I would definitely say in my life, having that initiative has been huge, because there's a ton of people, especially if they're more senior in this industry and they've got decades worth of experience. They're probably willing to meet with you, right? If you have the initiative just to ask for the meeting, they probably will. Whether or not you have a second one or you build a relationship, in my opinion, is solely on you.
Yeah. Show up with something to talk about.
Yes.
Right. Have a plan.
Don't just be like, hey.
How do I do it?
Yeah.
What do I do? Tell me what to do. Yeah.
How do I become you? How do I be successful? Because time is very sensitive. We only have a limited amount. And a lot of these guys who've been in the industry for so long and are so successful, they don't have a lot of time. But they are willing to help people who will help themselves, to put it on in quotations. So you have to take that initiative. You got to show up with something to talk about. You've got to recognize, what you're good at, what your passion is, and where you want to go. And you got to put that out there.
Yeah.
Which
is not comfortable.
Yeah.
Especially when you don't have all your ducks in a row, right?
Yeah. And then being vulnerable to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, if someone gives you advice to do this, stopping the conversation, say, I don't really know what you just said.
Yeah, what does that word mean?
I've had to really catch myself, years ago of just really doing that and saying, okay, I don't really know, because there is a little bit of pride there. You don't want to be vulnerable. You don't want to almost expose yourself as, you don't know, but you're young. You don't know.
Yeah, which is okay.
Yeah, which is okay. They've been exactly where you're at.
Yeah.
And there's a guy, as a mentor of mine, that, what he does is when people ask for a meeting, he'll tell them to read a book.
Yep.
And if they come back, read the book, and they have questions on the book, he'll take the meeting.
Yep.
And if they don't, and he said, oftentimes, I never hear it from them again.
Yep.
Because there's a level of initiative that has to be taken in order for someone of that caliber to actually end up pouring into you.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, it just shows that, like you said, you're willing to invest in yourself. Why would someone else invest in you?
No, absolutely.
If you're not willing to read 200 pages, right? Over the course of 2
or
weeks.
listen to 3 hours of
whatever
audio
it is. Yeah. Very, very easy. But yeah, it's people weed themselves out.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap up episode 1. We'll jump into episode 2. So Beyond the Blueprint, this has been episode 1 with Jeff Driskel. Make sure you stay tuned for the next one. I'm your host, Branson Bowen. See you soon.